Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf is a very long daf, primarily a Gadata. It begins by discussing the story of Nicanor and the doors that he donated to the Beis Hamikdash. Then we have a Mishnah that lists people who would not share their talents and their skills and their abilities with other people in the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara will describe the four of them and what they did, why they didn't share it, and when we somewhat forgave them. And then the Gemara will launch into a lengthy discussion of Tzaddik and Rasha, Tzaddik versus Rasha, the mile of being together with a Tzaddik, being together with a Rasha, how Hashem helps Tzaddikim, and how Hashem allows Rashaim. And we'll carry it into Daf Lamed, so we'll finish the third parak of the Masechta. So first of all, the Gemara, let's begin. The Gemara was listing people who donated things to the Beis Hamikdash that the Chachamim were pleased with. And the Gemara mentioned the Nicanor who gave the doors that were called the Nicanor doors. The Gemara relates the incident. Nicanor was a tzaddik who went to special craftsmen in Alexandria, in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, in order to prepare special beautiful doors made of copper. He put them in a boat and was traveling back, but a tremendous storm, or the Gemara used the word nachshol, which is a tidal wave, rose up and it was going to sink the boat. So the sailors threw one of the doors overboard, and it did not calm the sea. So they were going to throw the other one. Nicanor grabbed onto it and he said, "Are you throwing it overboard? Are you throwing me with it?" And as soon as he said that, the sea calmed, and they were able to make it safely to Eretz Yisrael. But Nicanor was very upset about the door that he lost. But when they arrived in the port of Akko, the door was there. Two versions as to what happened to it. One is that it was floating underneath the ship the entire way, and they were able to get it out. And the other one is that a special sea creature, a giant fish, had swallowed it and spit it out on the sea, and they had it. As far as the second version, that it was a sea creature, the Gemara applies a pasuk said by Shlomo HaMelech in Shir Hashirim, Karis Botenu Arazim, Rahitenu Beroisim. The walls of our house are cedar, and our furniture is Beroisim. The Beroisim, the Gemara says, should be read as Brias Yam. It was brought by a creature of the sea. The Gemara says, because of the special zchus of Nicanor and a special Mesiras Nefesh, all the doors of the Beis Hamikdash were eventually replaced with gold, except for Nicanor's. Nicanor's stayed because of his Mesiras Nefesh and because of the miracle that happened to him. The Gemara says, so possibly because they were such high quality that they shone like gold, or maybe because they were so refined that they gave light like gold does. Okay, now we get to the Mishnah, which lists four people who would not share their talents with other people relative to the Beis Hamikdash, and the Gemara says that these are lignai. These are mentioned for disgrace, and the four are as follows. Beis Garmu had the special ability to make the lechem apanim in its proper shape, and they didn't share it. Beis Avtinis knew how to make the kitores. Horgrus, the Levi, knew how to sing in a particular beautiful way, and he didn't want to teach anybody. And somebody named Ben Kamtsar knew how a special way of writing that the Gemara will describe and didn't want to share with anybody. The Gemara says, for these we say, Shem Risham Yirkav, the name of the wicked should rot. For those we mentioned previously, which refers to the previous Mishnah, according to the Pashup Pshat, the Gemara in Shkalim has a question who it refers to, but those who we mentioned previously, we say Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, they were tzaddikim and did wonderful things for the Beis Hamikdash, and when you mention the name of a tzaddik, you give him a bracha. Okay, the Gemara now describes what happened with each of these four families, with a lengthy brisa that goes into the details, and a number of other brisas with other stories that are involved. So first of all, the first two are very similar, Beis Garmu with the Lechem Apanim, and Beis Avtinis with the Ketorah. So it says as follows. Beis Garmu knew how to make the Lechem Apanim in a special way. They charged a very high price, and the Chachamim were looking for a replacement. So they went and they brought craftsmen from Alexandria of Mitzrayim to try to do it. They were able to bake it, they were able to make the dough, they were able to make its proper form. The Lechem Apanim was shaped like a box with sides, but the top wasn't covered all the way. But they could not take it out of the oven without breaking it. So therefore, they would bake it outside the oven. They would put a fire outside the oven, and they would, according to some Rishonim, they would stick it on the wall of the oven from the outside, or they would just leave it outside the oven to bake. But because of that, it didn't bake properly, and it ended up being raw inside. And because of that, it rotted, and it was no good. So they had to call. So the Chachamim said, "Okay, we have to call back the Beis Garmu people." As the pasuk says, everything Hashem created is for His honor, and they have this special skill, like the pasuk called Hanikra B'Shmi L'Chloidi Berasiv. Called them back, and they said, "No, we're not coming." So they gave him twice as much salary. How much was it before? They got paid 12 maneh. Afterwards, they paid them 24 maneh. According to Yehuda, they used to get paid 24 maneh. Now they got paid 48 maneh. This is an exorbitant amount of money. The Gemara says a person could live on 2 maneh a year. So now they had either 24 or 48, and they came back to work. And the Chachamim said, why did you not want to share it with anybody? They said, because it's a special skill used to serve Hashem, and we know that this Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed one day, and we're afraid that if the knowledge and information of how to do it is out there, people will go and use it to serve Avodah Zarah, and we don't want that to happen. Gemara says there is one thing that they praised the Beis Garmu people for, and that is that they were above suspicion. Their children were never seen eating clean white bread. They only ate rough, coarse bread that could not possibly have been from lechem apanim. That way people would not suspect of having given their children lechem apanim bread. And that is a fulfillment of the pasuk V'yisim Nikim Hashem Yisrael. You should be above suspicion of Hashem and Yisrael. Very similar thing happened with Beis Tinis. They're the only ones who knew how to make the ketores. Chacham sent for workmen from Alexandria. They were able to make the ketores in the right formula of spices, but they couldn't figure out how to make the smoke go straight up. Their smoke would scatter all over the place, while the smoke of Beis Tinis would go straight up as a stalk, straight up as a column. So they needed to call back the Beis Tinis people, and they said, everything Hashem made is for His honor, like the pasuk says, called Pal Hashem L'Maneyu. And then when they called them back, they said, we're not coming. They said, okay, twice as much salary. Used to be 12, now it's 24. Used to be 24, now it's 48, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And they came, they went back to work. The Chacham said, why don't you share it? They said, Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed. We didn't want anybody to go use this special talent and skill for Avodah Zarah. Now the Gemara brings one thing that they were praised for, and that is that their wives, their kalas, their daughters-in-law never were wearing perfume, so people shouldn't say they perfume themselves with the ketores. As a matter of fact, whenever they were getting married, they would tell their prospective wife, listen, if you're marrying into this family, got to get used to the idea that you're not going to have any perfume. And that's al das kain. It's with that understanding that we're agreeing to get married. And again, they fulfilled the pasuk V'yisim Nikiyim Hashem Yisrael. Now the Gemara brings three other brises with three stories related to this. Rabbi Yishmael says, once I was walking on the way and I found somebody from the family of Beis Tinis, and I said, your fathers tried to keep all the covet for themselves, and therefore minimizing the covet of Hashem because other people couldn't bring the ketores. Now look what happened, their covet is gone. This is Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and the covet of Hashem will come back. Rabbi Kiva says, he once heard from Yishmael ben Luga that he was out in the fields and he saw a descendant of the Beis Tinis in the field, and then he started crying and laughing. He said, why are you crying? He said, because my forefathers' covet is all lost. He said, why are you laughing? He said, because I know it's coming back one day. They'll be restored to the position when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt. He said, what is the mind to give you this now? He said, well, I just saw some of the Mala Ashen plant, the special plant that was put in the ketores to make the smoke go straight up. I see it there. So he said, show me. He said, nope. Our family policy is we do not share it with anybody, lest it be used for Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says, however, the Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri says, I once met an old man with a special list of potions on a scroll that was holding in his hand, and I asked him, who are you and what's that? He said, I'm from Beis Tinis, and that's the recipe for the ketores. So he said, show me. He said, I will show you, and I'll tell you why. Because my forefathers didn't show it to anybody as long as the Beis Hamikdash was still standing, and they were afraid anybody was going to, if they gave it to anyone, it was going to be misused. However, now that Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, it could be lost. Therefore, I'm giving it over to you. Take care of it and be careful with it. Make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Said Rabbi Kiva, now you see that their intent all along was really not for covet, it was really Shem Shemayim, and now we don't say negative things about them at all. Based on that, the Gemara quotes Ben Azai, who says, B'Shimcha Yikru'ucha, U'imkaimcha Yeshivucha, that people shouldn't worry about maybe they're going to lose their covet, or lose their honor, or lose their job. Hashem gives the right position for the right person in the right time, and you don't get anything from anybody else at all. Even two kingships, one does not begin as long as the other one's not finished. It all is measured out exactly which ruler or which administration will begin and when exactly the other one will end. The new one doesn't begin until the first one has finished its full complement of time. Okay, the next in the Mishnah was Hogros the Levi. The Gemara says, what would he do? He knew how to sing in a way. He used to put his thumb in his mouth and his finger between his mustache hairs, or perhaps going to a different version, between the strings of the violin. And he would sing in such an amazingly beautiful way that the Kohanim would be blown backwards by the beauty of the sound that he was producing. But he didn't teach that to anybody. The Gemara doesn't say why, but the Gemara implies later for the same reason he didn't want other people to use it in the service of Avodah Zarah. Now, the next brisa quotes what happened with Ben Kamtsar. He didn't want to teach anybody his method of writing. The Gemara says he was able to tie a quill to each of his 4 fingers, besides the thumb, and he could write 4 letters at once, and therefore he was able to write the Shem Hashem all at once. There's a special mila to writing that way. But there, you didn't have to worry about anybody who is going to use it for Avodah Zarah, because first of all, we don't care how they wrote their name, and second of all, they weren't interested. So Gemara says, they asked them, why don't you share your talent? And he didn't have what to answer. So here, the Gemara says, on the first ones, we say, Zeich HaTzadik Levracha. It seems to indicate that the first three, we changed our disapproval of them, and we said Zeich HaTzadik Levracha. And on this last one, Ben Kamsar, and people like him, we say Shem Rishayim Yirkov, may the name of the wicked rise. The Gemara now launches into a lengthy Agadata about Tzaddikim and Rishayim, and how when you mention a Tzaddik's name you give Bracha, when you mention a Rasha's name you give Kloa, and it's Shadrat. The Gemara begins by analyzing the phrase Shem Rishayim Yirkov, the name of the wicked Shadrat. What does it mean it's Shadrat? So the Gemara says, Rav Elazar said it should become rusty, like the word rekavivus, which means rust. It should become rusty from disuse. We should not give the name to anybody else so that it should become unused. So the Gemara says, is that true? You don't give the name of Rasha to anyone. You know, there's a Rasha in the times of Shmuel, who was named Doeg. However, we see much later there was another person by that name, because the Gemara quotes an incident that happened at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. There was a child named Doeg ben Yosef, whose father passed away, and he was raised by his mother, and his mother was so proud of him, she measured him every day to see how much he grew. However, when the famine grew so strong in Yerushalayim, she actually ate him. And about him, Yirmiyahu used to say, if the women who measure their children by such careful measurements would go and eat their own kids based on the insanity caused by the hunger. And over there, as we say in the Kinnis, that the Ruach HaKodesh said back, Im Yaharg b'mikdash Hashem Kohen v'Navi, if you could kill in the Beis Hamikdash a Kohen and a Navi, referring to Zechariah, the Navi, who was also a Kohen, who was stoned to death in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, so yes, in Akasha, why was this child named Doeg after a Rasha? The Gemara says, you're right, he shouldn't have been, and look what happened to him. He met a very bitter and unfortunate end. So you see, it is actually not a good idea to name a child like that. Okay, the Gemara goes further, and the Gemara says that a tzaddik who has a bracha, that is a tzaddik that is his bracha for his own ma'asim, but thinks he does himself. A wicked man, once you're cursing him, once his name is writing, it's together with all other Rishayim, because it says tzaddik, zecher tzaddik levracha, and Rishayim, plural, it says Shem Rishayim Yirkov. Now the Gemara goes further, and the Gemara says, Ravina asked a Rabbanan, who used to put together Agadata, and he said, what is the source of this thing that people say, zecher tzaddik levracha? The Gemara says, what do you mean, what's the source? It's a pasuk, zecher tzaddik levracha. The Gemara says, it's not a pasuk in the Torah. Where do you see it in the Torah itself? It's a pasuk in the Navi. Where do you see that the Torah itself says Zecher Tzadik Levracha? The pasuk Zecher Tzadik Levracha V'Shem Rishayim Yirkov is in Mishlei. It's in Ksuvim. So the Gemara says the source for it in the Torah itself is when Hashem mentioned Avram, because he said he was going to tell Avram about what he's planning for Sodom. So he said, am I going to hide from Avram what I'm planning to do? And having mentioned Avram's name, he spoke in his praise, and he said, Avram is going to be a great nation and teach his children to follow my ways. Now he continued and he said, how do you know that Shem Rishayim Yirkov, the name of the wicked, should write? He said, well, that's also pasuk. He said, no, again I'm asking, where does it say that in the Torah? Versus that's about Sodom also, like it says Vayehel ad Sodom, mentioning where he settled until Sodom. And then as soon as it mentions Sodom, it says the people of Sodom were wicked and sinning to Hashem very much. Okay, now the Gemara says, what's a tzaddik? The Gemara says somebody who lives between two Rishayim and doesn't learn from their actions, that's a tzaddik. And the example of that is Ovadia, who lived between Achav and Izevel, two tremendous Rishayim. And the classic example of a Rasha, somebody who lives between two tzaddikim and doesn't manage to learn from them. What's the example of that? Esav lived between Yitzchak and Yaakov and did not learn from that. Gemara goes further and says that the blessing for tzaddikim is learned right from the cursing of the wicked, and the cursing of the wicked is learned from the blessing of the tzaddikim. Where do you see that? So Gemara says, but what we were discussing earlier, we said bracha to Avram. When as soon as we mentioned him, we said that Avram is going to follow in the ways of Hashem, and I'll teach his children afterwards. Right afterwards, Hashem says, Zakas V'Amaraki Rabba, that Sodom is cursed and they're doing terrible things and they're about to be destroyed. Where do you see the opposite, that the bracha of tzaddikim is learned from the cursing of Rishayim? So the Gemara says, like it says, the people of Sodom were very wicked, and right afterwards, it says, Vashem Amar L'Avram Acher Yipard Loid Me'imai, and he gave him the brachas, he spoke with him, and he gave him the brachas that he was going to give with him. Now the Gemara talks about the fact that tzaddikim are able to be enough to justify the existence of the entire world. The Gemara says, even if there's one tzaddik existing in the world, it's enough to keep the world going. Like the pasuk says, "Vayar Elokim es ha'or kitayv." Hashem saw the light, and decided to keep the light around. Why? Kitayv, because there's something good. What's good? Ein tayv al tzaddik. Good refers to tzaddikim, like it says, tzaddik kitayv. Another source for this is coming up. The Gemara says, anybody who forgets any of his learning causes golus to his children, and causes them to go into exile, like it says in the pasuk in Hosea, "Vatishkach Toras Elokecha, eshkach banecha gam ani." You forget the Torah of Hashem, I will forget your children. Now the Gemara has another drasha based on the first part of this pasuk itself, and that is that he is brought down from his greatness, like the pasuk says, "Ki ata yidata ma'astav emasecha mikayin li." Right in that pasuk discussing forgetting your Torah, it says you've become disgusting to me, and you will lose your position as Kohen. That's what Hosea was warning. Okay, now the Gemara says further that the tzaddik does not leave the world until another tzaddik exists to take his place. Like we had said earlier, that the tzaddik is enough to keep the world going. You need to have a tzaddik in the world at all times to keep the world going. How do you know that one always comes before the previous one leaves? Like it says, "V'zarach hashemesh, uba hashemesh," the sun shines and then the sun sets. First the sun shines in the next one, the next sunset, the next sun rises before the previous sun sets. Similarly, you see that before Eli passed away, Shmuel was already prepared and ready to take over. Shmuel was the next tzaddik in the next generation afterwards. Okay, now the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw, looking throughout all of history, that actual tzaddikim were few, and therefore he spread them out amongst all generations, so there should be a tzaddik in every generation to keep the world up. How do you see that? From the pasuk in Shmuel that says, La Hashem mitzuki eretz v'yashes aleim tevel. There's very few people to keep the world up, and Hashem spread them amongst all of the land, meaning all of existence. It says further, even for one tzaddik, the entire world will keep going, as we said before. Like it says, tzaddik yisayid eilam. Tzaddik is the foundation of the world. Rabbi himself said it's from Raglei Chasidav Yishmar. And it says Raglei Chasidav is plural. You're saying Raglei Chasidav Yishmar based on the actions of the Chasidim. Hashem will keep the world, but that's plural Chasidim. The Gemara says, yeah, but the spelling is Chasidoi without an extra yud, and therefore it's implying even if it would be singular. The Gemara says, other Josh is based on the pasuk Raglei Chasidav Yishmar. Raglei here is understood as the end of his life. So Gemara says that somebody who has been a tzaddik for the majority of his life will not sin afterwards. He's already a chassid. He's already qualified as chassidav, and therefore Raglei, the end of his life, Hashem will guard so he doesn't come to sin. The Gemara says it doesn't even have to be his entire life. Even if he has an opportunity to do an avera once or twice and he resists, he will find assistance afterwards resisting, like it says Raglei chassidav Yishmar. The Gemara says, now launches into a discussion of how Hashem helps the tzaddikim, helps people who want to do mitzvahs, and he allows people to do averas. He doesn't help them, he allows them. So the Gemara says, the pasuk, im leleitzim hu yalotz v'la anavim mitein nechein. So the Gemara understands that somebody who wants to be mitame, somebody who wants to do tame things, wants to do evil, so we open the door for him, we allow him to, we give him the opportunity, we don't help him. However, somebody who wants to be matayar, somebody who wants to purify himself, misaynais, he gets actual support. Gemara gives a mashal, somebody goes to a store to buy foul-smelling kerosene, or something like that, so the store owner will say, here's, go measure it for yourself, let me know how much you're taking, I'm not going to help you. However, if he comes to buy a farsimon, the most beautiful smelling perfume, he say, I'm going to come together, we'll go and measure it together so that we can both be scented by its beautiful smell. Now the Gemara brings another pasuk that says, you should not become impure by it, or you could become impure by it. It's a pasuk referring to eating impure creatures, pasuk in Vayikra, but the word v'nitmeisem bam is spelled without an aleph, and therefore it should really be pronounced v'nitamtem. So when it says, yeah, any avera is mitamtem, it covers, it blocks, it creates a layer of impurity upon one's heart, like the pasuk says, mitamtem bam in that spelling. Or says, based on this, you can continue and say that if somebody who is mitame himself, he will get more tumah. If he's mitame himself, In this world, he'll become tamei in the next world, and the inverse is true, as we have a brisa that says, "V'hiskadashtem v'yisem kedeshim." If you will sanctify yourself, you will become holy. Somebody who sanctifies himself a little bit, they sanctify him a lot. Somebody who sanctifies himself in this world down below, they will sanctify him greatly in Olam Haba. And that concludes the third parak of the
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.